Double countdown. Hey everyone, welcome to Flavor Talk with the Barbecue Pro Shop Factory team. I'm co-host Brian Neal, aka Mr. Freak of Smoke Freaks Barbecue.
Hey everyone, I'm Ann Neal, otherwise known as Ms. Freak, and together Brian and I are the tongues and testers behind the Factory Team Flavor Guide at Barbecue Pro Shop, the world's first and only online seasonings decoder and buying guide. And joining us in flavor is our partner Jeff from Barbecue Pro Shop, going all the way back to 2019. Say hello, Jeff.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Great to be here tonight.
It's a frosty night in most of the country, but we are joined by Phillip Breeden of LC BBQ, and he is one of the most successful cooks out there right now doing the whole barbecue food sport thing. Hey, Phillip, how are you doing tonight?
Man, I'm doing great. Appreciate you guys having me on.
From what I understand, it's a little frosty down in Texas tonight too, huh? Is that right?
Yeah, the North came down to visit us a little bit. We've had some teens here the past couple of days, so
yeah,
don't get that too often. It's been fun.
Yeah, I know the teens are no joke when you're in Texas. So for everyone tuning in tonight, we have got a great conversation in store because Phil has put together a super impressive line of products that are all about flavor. And we are going to dig in on how you can use some of them in your own cooking, whether that's for competition where Philip has made his name or out in the backyard. And along the way, you're going to get to know Philip if you don't already. So we are going to get to jumping right into it. We got a whole bunch to talk about here. So Phil, how about we start with the most basic biographical stuff, like where you're from, where you living now, and what's your life look like when you're not doing barbecue stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So up until about 4 years ago, I'm born and raised in Southeast Texas, Sour Lake near Beaumont. And about 4 years ago, we moved out to the Texas Hill Country. We live in Bandera now, and went full-time barbecue through almost 3 years ago now. And yeah, so barbecue's life.
Barbecue is life now. So Bandera, I Googled it up on the map, and it looks like it's pretty much the middle of nowhere. Just, what is that? Northwest of San Antonio? Is that about right?
Yeah, northwest, about an hour outside of San Antonio. Yeah, pretty much near the heart of the hill country.
Right on. So what's the view like from your spread up there? You see hills and cattle with big horns, or what?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, a lot of cedars out this way, mesquite trees, rolling hills, some more aggressive than other areas. But man, it's just beautiful out here. Not too many people comes out this way and doesn't say it's just beautiful. So it's hill country's hard to leave, and it's always great to come back to.
Yeah, sure is. I've only got to visit a few times, but I sure do love it there. So let's dig into the barbecue life. It sounds like 3 years now that's been your life. So how about a quick accounting of just what are some of the many things in barbecue you're involved with these past 3 years?
Yeah, so obviously we have LC BBQ, which we released our first product back in 2018. So for the past 5 going on 6 years, we've been building our line of products slowly but surely, I would say.
So LC BBQ is both a product brand and a competition team or brand, I guess, then, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we have LC BBQ, our products, rubs and injections, and then when we compete under LC BBQ and have since 21. You know, we've been competing since 2015. Originally, my competition team name was Lucky Charms. So when we launched our line of products, we didn't want General Mills mooching on us, so we abbreviated LC BBQ is how that was born. So
I gotta say, I had always wondered what the LC stands for. It seems like it would have stood for something or other. So LC is Lucky Charms. So I gotta know, what are your Lucky Charms? Barbecue people, we're superstitious. You know, we many of us have a Lucky Charm, or many. Do you have any?
No, not really. And the name, I didn't pick the name. The name was given to me. You know, the group of buddies when I first started competing, you know, they called me Leprechaun. So man, naturally, somehow Lucky Charms came up and it just stuck really hard. I try not to be superstitious. The only thing I consider that would be lucky, man, I've really put a lot of thought into what socks I'm going to wear to awards. So
Okay.
that's about as superstitious as I get.
Gotcha.
So
You got
can
your
we-
walking socks.
Those are your walking socks. Yeah, I know, for me, I got a bunch of Lucky Charms, my Lucky Lighter. I won't go on and on and on because I can't.
No, it's good stuff.
Like
It's
I
good
love
stuff. I made it a mental note to not have those because, at some point those can eat you up, right? Because then you're like, man, I didn't do that at 8:15 something, and I didn't want to be attached to anything like that or get in my head. So I tried to make it my best move not to get tied into superstitions. But for the teams that have them, it's really fun. All the different interesting things there are. So depending on how the cook goes that day, it's probably going to dictate what pair of socks I pick to go to awards in.
You are a smart
folks are
man.
already sounding off on
They're
their
sounding
Lucky
off
Charms.
with their Lucky Charms, and Phil, you are a smart man because as smoke freaks, Brian and I have another huge Lucky Charm and a routine and a superstition. 10:40, that's when we wrap ribs. So yeah, it's to the minute, just like you said. So
Oh yeah, and if you're visiting with somebody, I mean, like, we'll pick this up in a minute because I got to wrap those ribs at 10:40. 10:42 won't work.
won't work.
10:38, Ann and I have to do our rib wrapping dance first in every competition, so we got to build into time for that. But let's talk about this barbecue stuff. 3 years, it's your full-time gig, so you must be doing a lot out there to support the LC brand and get the word out about the products. What's that look like? What are you doing to make this thing a go?
Yeah, so the majority of what I do is cook, competition and a lot. I'll do 50 cook-offs year in and year out, and I travel quite a bit. I like to hit different areas, meet new people. Past couple of years, I've been mostly in Texas, but we'll do the roll and we'll cook out of state 4 or 5 times a year. And back in 21, we cooked in 17 states. It was nice to meet a lot of the people in the KCBS world. That barbecue family's big, and man, it's great no matter where you go. It's just full of terrific, good people that are, man, it's so funny how, you get different characters in different parts of the country, but man, it's all kind of the same and replicated just by different people all over. But yeah, so the main thing I do is a lot of competitions. And since I went full-time at first, when I went full-time barbecue, competitions are on the week and you get prepared during the week. But man, a full week of doing that, I kind of had somewhat, for not very long, a hard time figuring out what to do. It was almost not like I was retired because, I spent 25 years in electrical distribution. So I worked full time and competed every weekend. So I got a lot of time to, just dedicate solely to the barbecue world when I went full time 3 years ago. And man, I've had no problem filling all that time during the week steadily over the past 3 years to where it's getting pretty jammed up to where there's not a whole lot of free time anymore.
I hear you. When Mr. Freak and I were hitting the trail hard with 25 KCBS comps a year, which sounds like nothing compared to the rigor of your typical, yearly do. We had full-time jobs doing the whole KCBS thing. Wednesdays, it was the Wednesday shuffle because I'm running around getting kale and running around trying to find chicken, running around trying to find parquet, squeeze tube, half a molecule away from parquet, plastic butter, that kind of thing. I get it. So how did you get into this crazy business of comp barbecue, driving around, finding all the meat, driving around the country, cooking for strangers in a parking lot, hoping to do well? How did that come to be?
Yeah. So, my first comp was in January of 2015, and in the fall of 2014, like I do year in and year out, spend a lot of time at the deer camp. And that particular fall, I had a buddy out there, Rob Rogers, and we're hanging out at the deer camp, and they had an offset out there. So, man, it's nothing funner than, man, let's cook some barbecue. I've always loved to cook my whole life, but not really barbecued a whole lot, grilled off and on, nothing really serious. But, and we were cooking 2 or 3 days a week out there, feeding people. And of course they loved it. And he's like, man, you ought to do a competition. And I'm like, man, they have those? And he's like, oh yeah. So there's one next month. I'll get the info. I'll get a sign up. I'll help you and all that stuff. Well, okay, do that. And he did, and we went and did that comp. It was in Silsbee, Texas. It was a Go Texan, and they had 19 teams. You Man, I didn't even know. I didn't know anything. Like, here, those the turn-in box. Okay, that's good to know. I mean, I'm starting from ground zero. And anyway, we cooked that comp and got our turn-ins done. They only called the top 3 in each category, and man, they did chicken. We were pretty pumped because it was good chicken. And man, it got down to first, and man, it wasn't us. So yeah, like, but ribs just aren't going to be our jam. So we go into ribs, and man, again, nothing. And I looked over at Carmen, my wife, and I said, "Hey, you want to go fishing next weekend?" I don't know about this barbecue gig. They got down to first place brisket, and it was us. And man, that changed the course of my life. Hook just like that.
I love that story, and people who have, been around the barbecue game have probably heard a version of that story or experienced it themselves probably 100 times. And in fact, Ann and I got started the exact same way, right about the exact same time, except it was up at a little Chicago comp, about the same number of teams, and we got our first place in ribs, and we had probably not as elegant of a cook as you had, it sounds like. I was absolutely fighting through it. We had no idea what we were doing. We had an alley picked and I knew the 3-2-1 recipe and how to wrap stuff with mustard, and somehow fought my way through the wind when that little smoker wanted to run 350 degrees. So I abandoned 3-2-1 real quick and somehow managed to win that. And Ann and I've been cooking hot and fast ever since.
Yep. And like pretty much everybody in the barbecue world's got a story like that, or they're fishing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I know that you have had an awful lot of your experience down in Texas where there's some other sanctioning bodies other than what we do. Up north, KCBS is pretty big, and that's how we got started. I think we only crossed paths there once at the American Royal, and I think it was probably 2017, and you kicked our ass, and haven't seen you since. But tell me a little bit about the bodies down there. I know IBCA is big, and you got a team of the year in that one. And lately, I've been seeing you tearing it up in something called the CBA. So
yeah.
maybe you give us a rundown of what those two formats are about, what you cook, and what's a weekend like out on those trails.
Yeah, so we have quite a few, 4 or 5, maybe more sanctioning bodies, but I guess the 2 primary one, or you could even go 3 or even 4. Yeah, so there's a lot in Texas. But when I started in 2015, IBCA was the largest sanctioned body in Texas, and I did mainly IBCA contests. You had Lone Star, which you still do, but they were kind of mainly in the hill country. And at the time, I didn't live close to those, so I didn't do a whole lot of them. And I mainly did IBCA. In 2020, maybe 2020, I think CBA was born, if I got my years right, which is Champions Barbecue Alliance. Some members, anyway, it kind of formed their own one and had a different vision of what maybe Texas barbecue competitions would look like. Doing all the years at IBCA contest is a 3 meat, chicken, ribs, and brisket. And these days, man, no garnish. You'll do one half chicken in a box with a piece of foil laid in the bottom. Ribs, you'll do 8 ribs parallel to the bone with a piece of foil in the bottom, and 8 slices of brisket. No burn ends, no chop. Slices of briskets, cascaded parallel to the hinge with a piece of foil in the bottom, and that's your 3 turn-ins: noon, 1:30, and 3 o'clock, and do awards 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and that's what life looked like for a long time.
That's a luxurious turn-in window compared to some of the some of the bodies out there, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So 15, 16, 17, 18. That's all I pretty much did was IBCAs. In 2018, I went and did my first KCBS, which was the American Roll, and you can imagine, going from a 3 meat, 12, 1:30, and 3. Everybody in Texas panics, going, man, I don't know how we're going to make turn-ins. It's every 30 minutes. There's 4 meats, and it's mass chaos. And it kind of is, until it kind of, once you're raised that way, it's a lot easier to go the other direction, But yeah, so back up a few years ago, and it's been 3 years now that CBA's been around, and they're for me. They're chicken, ribs, pork, and brisket. And on their turn-ins, still no garnish. It's a piece of foil, but on chicken, you can do a half chicken if you like. You can do anything you want other than pulled or chopped. chicken meat. So you could do legs, you could do thighs, wings, or half chickens, and however you want to put it in the box. So there's no rules on that. Give it a lot more flexibility. So it kind of the way CBA does is opens everybody from Texas up to a KCBS, more of a KCBS format, to where you got more creativity coming in it. And also the turn-in times are 12, 1, 2, and 3. So they're an hour apart. Still not the 30-minute, but you're a little bit busier doing that. And really, I really love the hour turn-ins because, in KCBS, it's fast and furious. So hold on. And CBA, they're probably a little bit long, but man, it gives me a time to maybe drink a beer or something, or visit with somebody for 5 minutes. KCBS, there's none of that going on. We're rolling.
I hear you. I swear, speaking of chicken, it's my dream before I retire from this crazy barbecue life to turn in pulled chicken with Alabama white sauce. One of these days, I'm going to do it, and that'll be the end of me. So, Phil, what kind of equipment?
You never know. You might be doing it every comp after that. There's one way to find out.
There's one way to find out, and I'm going to do it. With my chicken that's cryovac in the freezer, 2019 chicken. I got
That's the last time we trimmed comp chicken.
8 thighs. I'm ready. So, Phil, what equipment are you cooking on in these types of competitions?
Yeah, so the first couple comps that I did, this is where my brain was at way back then. A lot of people had drums at the time, and I don't really like to follow the crowd. So, man, I'm sure I saw something on the internet or something popped in my brain, but I'm like, man, I'll have whiskey barrels. Like, I can make a drum smoker out of those. And I did. I made 2 of them. And that's what I cooked on that first contest we talked about was, man, 2 whiskey barrel drums. And man, they were really great. Hit first place brisket at that comp. Next comp, a month later, was an IBCA in Buna, the Redbud Festival, and hit first place at that contest too with that brisket. But, back then, man, I was so new to it and eating it up. I got to the contest on Friday and I'm like, man, I'm going to practice the ribs before tomorrow. So I'm cooking these ribs Friday evening. It's midnight, drinking beer. They're almost done. Oh, these are great, delicious. And I looked down at that drum, and at the time I had it on a little utility trailer, and it's smoking like a lot. I'm like, man, that doesn't really look right. And I kind of moved it a little bit. Man, it done burn a hole in the bottom of that trailer. The whole bottom of the barrel was going on it, and ended up getting some 60-40 off the second base at the Little League park we were at, putting in the bottom just to finish the cook-off at. And then, so after that gig, I mean, as much as it was hitting on the brisket, but man, it didn't feel like a permanent situation. I felt like those drums were going to go up in flames. So man, I'm like, I really want to offset is what my brain, I think I want. And, man, I had looked at the pit makers, and those were nice. And I even talked to those guys, and they're like, oh yeah, it's about 6 to 8 weeks. And man, I'm not real patient. I'm like, that's way too long. I can build one. So I did. And I'm like, I want it fully insulated. Anyway, I built a fully insulated with similar dimensions to a pit maker sniper, 4-foot cooking chamber, 2-foot firebox, fully insulated, offset, reverse flow. And that's what I've been cooking on ever since, primarily. If I travel, I'll cook on some drums. They're easy to borrow. I've got a little 30-gallon on the porch right now that I play with on chicken and stuff. I get bored, so I like different stuff. But my workhorse has been that offset that I built back in 15.
All right. Well, I got to break in with a personal invitation you got from the audience tonight. John Klein has invited you to come up to the Death Store Barbecue Contest, and I cannot recommend that thing highly enough. That's up in Wisconsin. You got to get on a ferry to get there, but that is a bucket list comp if you can do it. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and they even got a beach full of like these crazy rocks that are like the softest rocks you've ever seen. So if you could ever do it, get up there in August and come to Death's Door.
I would love to. John, how you been, man? Good to hear from you. John was at the Rec Tech Academy when I was there a couple years ago, and had a great time. I would love to do that cook-off. I've got some friends that have. Kit Parton, he went up there one year, and as I understand, if I'm not mistaken, it has a reputation that the judging can be very brutal if you can put up with that. But just a bucket list cook-off, I hear great things about it.
Yeah, that's anything north of I-80 in this.
Yeah, that's the rule. North I-80. Yeah.
We've been on all sides of that.
Yeah,
The only ones that don't hate it is the ones that do good at that contest. So
yeah, we were always pretty good in Wisconsin for whatever reason, but man, we
Except
get
when
our
we
asses
weren't.
handed to us in some other places.
Except when we weren't.
All right,
except
well,
when we weren't. Fluke.
when we weren't. That's everybody's story, right?
Right.
Suffice to say, you've had an awful lot of success in the world of comp barbecue with dozens of wins and championships and a team of the year and world food invites and all the rest. And if I understand it right, every one of your LC barbecue products is kind of a spin-off of your competition exploits. So I'm hoping we can dig in on some of those products and how people listening can use them to make their own cooking magic, a little bit of shigging, if you will. Does that sound good?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All
Yeah.
right.
So
Well, yeah, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well,
I'll let you
it sounds
pave the
like
path.
the competition trail is really a big part of your R&D process, but I'm wondering what made, I guess I know the answer now that you told me you made your own pit, but I was wondering what made you initially want to go out and make your own stuff when most of us are really content to play around with the massive universe of stuff that's already on the shelves and everywhere from Home Depot to Barbecue Pro Shop to Ace Hardware. But you
Yeah,
went out
for
and
sure.
made your own. So what was up with that?
Yeah. So we'll go back to that first cook-off real quick. And it was far from elegant, like you mentioned earlier. In fact, I think Rob, he's like, man, you can do anything you want on chicken and ribs. I'll take the lead on brisket. Okay, good idea. So obviously we didn't walk in chicken and ribs. That was, my lead, my genius idea. And, that first year of cooking, I kind of got the ribs figured out a little bit, and the brisket was always solid, and the chicken was not. It was hurting me. I wasn't walking in chicken, so it was my weakest category for a year or two or whatever, and I had the hardest time putting that one together. Tried a lot of different products, and I'm sure it wasn't the products, but I just kind of got hard headed a little bit, and I'm like, let me start throwing some stuff together and figuring it out. What can it hurt? I'm not doing any good, and I kind of did that. I figure I probably got lucky, just learning, and it was just out of pure frustration of not being able to win. And man, I kind of created foul play at that point, and I had no intentions of that being a product or even thoughts of the product world or anything. It wasn't a grand scheme, but I ran that for a couple of years, and I won a lot of chicken with it. And in fact, it became my best category. And I don't know. But one day I got the bright idea of like, man, that would be cool if I would put it in a bag and then have a label on it and sell it. That'd be kind of cool. And at the time, the thought was probably like, man, it's either going to work or it ain't. It was definitely not a thought process of I'll just build an entire barbecue line of products.
So
But I did. Go
what's
ahead.
foul
Sorry.
play and how do you use it and who's buying it?
Yeah. So foul play is our chicken injection. That was our first product that we released in 2018. Man, when I released it in 2018, I had just like awesome support out of everybody, mainly in Texas, because I cooked a lot of IBC. I cooked a lot and won a lot. And man, you guys know, as soon as there's a product that comes on the market that's they see somebody doing well, man, they're going to try it. And if they do well, it kind of catches fire. And foul play kind of did that. So I think foul play's had just a strong presence especially in Texas. Since it was launched in 2018. And, in 21, I did like 40 KCBS, cooked in 17 different states, met a lot of great people, and put a name to that face of LC barbecue that a lot of KCBS folks had heard of. But, man, it's just, there's only a million of them out there, and it didn't mean anything. But when you meet somebody to them and then you give it a shot, oh, wow, that's good. And I won. So, that's how our presence and our I guess our MO to our line kind of started, was through foul play and injections. And I would say that we're greatly known for injections. We built the line through injections first, and then a few years ago started launching rubs, which are necessary. At the time, I felt kind of saturated on injections, and the natural progression would be to go to rubs and slowly build in those. And, the thought process now is to build a complete product line, including sauces and glazes, that you can just go to that shelf and need nothing else to run a comp.
So the foul play, if I was going to use that for next time we cook those 3-year-old chicken thighs, how do I use that stuff if I want to do well? What do you mix it with, and how much, and what do you do to it with it?
Yeah. So, man, when I designed it, when I was in the kitchen creating it, water was my liquid vessel. So, man, it works very, very well with water. But I also like chicken broth. So those are my two favorite liquids. You know, 3/4 of a cup to a cup of it to 32 ounces of either water or chicken broth is going to get you right where you need to be.
Does it
in my
need to be
opinion.
that sulfur tasting Texas water, or the bottled water work okay?
If you can find it. Yeah, bottled water is great. I mean, I don't have anything against tap water unless it smells like sulfur. So
If you're
yeah, I'm
Mr.
not.
Freak, you have something against tap water when you're making injections back in our KCBS heyday, right, Mr. Freak? Consistency, repetition, predictability. We have to have the same bottled water. I had gone through all the Wednesday shuffle and used, City of Chicago, water. And Mr. Freak is like, no. So
Yeah,
your
you gotta
water's
look
better.
at what's in that stuff.
I've won with tap water. I've lost with tap water. I've won with bottled water. I've lost with bottled water.
Just
So
don't use the water that comes out of your RV tank. That's my advice.
yeah, I probably wouldn't suggest it.
I wouldn't suggest it either. So Phil, right around this time, I think you have 5 dry rub seasonings, and I think 7 injections, brines, phosphates, that type of product. And the flavor guide over at Barbecue Pro Shop is for the dry seasonings. Other formats, part of our roadmap coming soon, perhaps. But
Nice.
Speaking of the flavor guides on the Barbecue Pro Shop website, let's dig into some of those for your dry seasonings. We're going to talk about maybe a couple if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Last call, magical rub right here. That was my first introduction to your product line when we started doing the flavor guides, and we loved it so much. We put it on our 2022 essential seasonings list. We do this every year. Those are seasonings that stand out among the hundreds that we test for the flavor guide as really, really, really special. I would love for you to tell us what this one's all about. Last call.
Yeah, first off, thank you guys. That's incredible to be on that list. Last call is what I call my COVID creation. It was in early 2020 when I was that brainchild came to my mind, and I started playing with. And as everybody knows, a lot of the country got shut down, and there was a time where nobody could even leave their house. So you got weeks you can't go to work, and it was crazy times. And me, like a lot of other people in America, what else you gonna do, man? Let's cook something. So cooking more at the house than I had in a long time over that time period, just with the crazy, couldn't go anywhere or do anything. There was no comp. So man, that's when Last Call was born. And I wanted something that had a little bit of coarseness to it, a good pepper flavor, but I didn't want any heat to it. And the sugar pepper kind of, to me, man, it just marries really well and offsets to where even when you go heavier and heavier and heavier, you don't build on that heat. So the way the yin yang works on that is just kind of special to me. The way I like to use it, I like to use it on bigger meats, whether that be brisket or if I'm at the house. Really like it on steaks. I use it on my SCA steaks when I cook there. Turkey, great on turkey. So bigger proteins, and it can stand alone, give a lot of pop.
We had someone asking about a good turkey smoke profile. You got one you want to throw out in a lightning round real quick?
Yeah, I thought they were going to put all that on. We were on Food Network, Barbecue USA season 2 last year. They filmed in 22 at the Royal, and yeah, they got a lot of footage, and we're boxing turkey, and man, they got the whole thing, and I just kind of figured they'd share it with the world, and I was okay with that. But we ended up hitting 4th, and that was kind of a cool moment. But yeah, my turkey smoke profile, since turkey smoke has been there, which I think started in 18, I think we're up to like 3 or 4 walks at the Royal in turkey smoke. We've done really well in it, and I did really well in turkey smoke when I cooked a lot of KCBS in 21. But yeah, foul play, man, Brian and Hendrench, I foul play it, and then last call.
I gotta say, I'm not kidding when I say I was really into the last call. And if I may, I'd like to just read what I said about the flavor guide. And it's so cool that you were talking about bigger meats and then also, turkey. So on the flavor guide at Barbecue Pro Shop, last call from LC BBQ really dazzled us in our flavor testing. This doesn't happen very often, but one taste and I literally was hooked on these flavors. Sweet, addictive, fire-kissed heat. Wow, just wow. Put this in your cart and don't look back.
That's really cool.
And for me, when I tasted, the first thing that came to my mind is this will be an amazing rib rub. And I was actually surprised you were talking about everything but ribs.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, really think it's a winner for that. In my part of country, I wouldn't say it's a hot rub because there's all that sugar to balance it out, but it's definitely got that classic sweet and heat thing going on that I really like in rib rub with a little bit less salt, it seems like, and for me, I don't like a real salty rub when I'm hitting ribs just because it soaks it up so much.
Yeah, so my brain, and I didn't mention ribs, but it is a layer in my ribs. I use it as my middle layer, and my brain's going, hey, I want this pepper layer in here, right? So I'll just kind of let the pepper guide me to what I'm seeing the meat do, and I know it's going to give that nice layer. If I'm cooking ribs at the house, hill country style, man, it can stand alone for that, right? Just as a rib rub, but in competition, it's a light layer for me.
Yeah, it's got a great color too. That's gonna just do exactly what you want on some ribs. So let's talk rawhide. That's this one for me falls into what Ms. Freak and I call a white AP, which they typically consist of salt, pepper, and magic is what typically in those things. What's that one for, and why'd you make that?
Yeah, so rawhide was my first introduction to a rub into the market. And, at the time it was just a natural progression to where my brain couldn't go much further with injections at the time. And I'm like, man, I've got to start working on some rubs. And in my mind, I picked something I thought would be pretty easy, like an AP or whatever. I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel, but I just wanted a solid all-purpose rub to give me a good base layer. And man, I probably got luckier that it's way better than my brain thought it would be when I was working on it. But you're going to get those classic flavors: salt, pepper, onion, garlic. And to me, there's a lot of them out there, and it's just those same combinations in different percentages or formulas, right? That can just steer those in different directions. But the MSG makes all 4 of those pop in a way to me that just, man, it's just an awesome base layer to me.
Yeah, y'all know MSG stands for magic, right?
That's the magic.
For sure. And,
that's the pop.
Rawhide to me seems maybe a little bit less like a comp rub in that in our kitchen, that shaker is by the stove. I mean, it's an everyday kind of thing. And in our flavor guides, let me go to my notes here. We said awesome on beef, pork, lamb, and everything. And speaking of everything, because pretty much everything that I like, has some salt, in it. So what are some of those other scenarios for rawhide for you?
Well, apparently it's really good on pork tenderloin. Forget what year it was, maybe 18 or 19, but we entered it in the Barbecue News, the rub contest that they had. And at the time we had certified last call and rawhide, and we entered all 3 of those in only the pork category. And rawhide took first place that year in that category. I think there was maybe 140 entries or whatnot. So, man, rawhide will surprise you. Like you said, I don't know how many shakers Carmen goes through a month, but man, that's a staple in our kitchen. It's right next to the stove. She's always cooking amazing meals, and it pretty much replaces salt and pepper. You can use it on in lieu of those, just out of a shaker and then season to your likeness. I think it carries well for soups, gumbos, casseroles, you name it. But big part of my competition world too. It's a base on all my meats.
I gotta just break in. It's amazing that you said that because Mr. Freak is always asking me, where's the salt? I'm like, salt?
We don't have salt.
We have salt, but we don't need salt. We got
Like
salt.
just salt?
We've got like 400 versions of salt.
Man, we're a blend family. We do blends.
One time I got to load my bug assault gun for shooting at the flies, and barbecue rub doesn't work. It clogs
I
up.
keep mine in the cabinet just for that reason.
You gotta have Morton salt with the lady on the front. That's the only one that works.
That's it.
Well, to wrap up our seasonings segment of the discussion, I'd love to talk about Hill Country Blend, which just had its flavor guide drop last week on Barbecue Pro Shop. Jeff, can you pull that one up? So Hill Country tested out for us to that perfect 3-3-3 balance that is typically corresponding with a masterpiece seasonings. There's probably, I think we're north of 300 seasonings that we've tested. 10 or so of them land right in that area.
400.
400, she says. Damn, we eat a lot of salt around here. So yeah, when they test out to that, one of the things I can say is when we're testing them, it's really hard to pin it down because everything is so level. It's like, I think they're sweet, but I can't find it. I think they're salt, but I can't find that. Everything just kind of comes in a perfect harmony. And once we pulled the wrapper off this to see what we were tasting, I was like, it's another one from that LC guy. Surprise, surprise. So, yeah, Hill Country Blend. Tell us the story of Hill Country Blend and how folks like me can use it to win friends and influence judges.
Yeah, for sure. So I released Hill Country Blend earlier last year. I think it was in the spring, whatnot. But I created it a couple years before that. But just in my brain, I couldn't find I didn't have any. I couldn't see where that product fit in the comp world or where it fit in actually. And I was developing another rub, and that was kind of my base to it. And I had all those percentages wrote down and everything, and I'm like, man, it's really good, but I'm working on another one that I never really got where I wanted it to go, but I had this portion, and then I would always have some of those containers over in the shop and this and that, and then one day, fast forward a couple years later, I'm like, man, that's just really good. I mean, it's just there's nothing like you said, you don't know where your brain takes you with that. You can't pinpoint things. I'm really big on balance. I think in the comp world, you need a lot of balance. You need to stay away from the too much of anything, the TOOs, I call it, offending judges. If it's too spicy or if it's a jalapeno flavor or cinnamon, you get out of bounds and you'll get dinged and there goes your comp, right? So, and Hill Country Blend was just super balanced. And I thought, man, that would be I didn't really have, wasn't really meant to be a comp rub solely. And, I'm in this comp world, been in it for nine years or so. And at some point, man, I'm probably not going to want to cook comps anymore. And to me, I'm just building the brand recognition in the comp world at the in the toughest scenarios. Obviously, if they'll work at competitions, they'll work at home. But man, this rub in my mind, where I finally found a place for it, was that perfect balanced rub to where, man, I'm cooking for people every now and then. I'll cater or cook for somebody's company party or this or that. And in the comp world, we layer. So you got a layer here, then another layer, then another layer that sweats in. You flip it over, layer, that sweats in. And man, if you're cooking for 50 people, man, you don't want rubs to be sweating in and layering this and that because it take forever. So to me, that rub is just perfect for if I'm cooking, 30 chicken quarters and 20 racks of ribs and 10 briskets. Man, I can use that on all those meats and produce an incredible product.
Yeah, I completely agree. And people ask us all the time, and we finally got our Pontius appearance. She likes to stop by for every show, so she just made it. But the 3333, that is a profile in general where three things I do with those 3-3-3-3s. Number one, that's a good suitcase rub. So if I'm going on vacation, I'm going to stay at an Airbnb for a week. That's really all I need to throw in my suitcase, and I'm going to be able to do pretty much anything with it. Now, out in the competition world, there's two particular ways. One, if I'm trying to build a new profile, I know that that's a great place to start because it's already awesome on its own. And then what do I want to put under that? And what do I want to put over that to kind of develop my own little thing that I'm trying to pull off? Or if I've got a profile that has potential and I feel like it needs to be fleshed out, it needs to be bigger. I know I can put a 3-3-3-3 in there and it's not going to upset that balance that I'd already worked so hard to get. So there you have it, a couple flavor guide tips of what to do with those things that Ms. Freak and I spend so much time making.
And there you have it. 3 amazing seasonings from LC BBQ you definitely should put in your arsenal. Mr. Freak, take it away.
Well, and for good measure, I don't want to forget, there's also the Sweet Leaning Honey Hole. That's a good one to check out. And LC BBQ certified. Those are 2 really killer rubs for pork and chicken, I know for sure, and probably a whole lot more. But we got to move on because Phil's got a whole nother live stream coming up in a while called the Chicken Fried Podcast. That's 8 p.m. tonight with Mr. Chicken Fried. So check that one out later on. You get even more of Phil, and I'm sure he's got a whole lot to say. But let's move on to the deep lineup you've got of those injectable products that you started with. And we'll start with the question I got the most when I was doing my R&D for this show. You got pretty much 2 everything, 2 chicken, 2 beef, 2 pork. What's up with all the twofers?
Yeah, so run down the quick injection line real quick. But Foul Play was our first product as our chicken injection. And, my brain naturally went after that. If I'm going to build this line, well, we'll start working on, you got pork and you got beef. So I started working on beef injection. That took, I don't know, 8 or 9 months. I test all these products on tour in the comps. If I can't win with it, man, why should I expect you guys to win with it or be able to sell it that way? So I vet them on the competition trail before they're ever released. When I was looking at releasing that brisket injection, I had 2 that I was kind of like, man, torn between. They're both really good. And this one, I don't know. And anyway, I ended up releasing Play Bull as my first brisket injection. Then I started developing pork, and Boss Hog was born shortly after that. Well, fast forward a couple of years down the road, and I'm like, where's my brain go? And man, I really had kind of like looked back to that brisket injection, that other one, and I'm like, man, I really like that one too. You know what? I'm gonna release it too, and then people can figure out what they like better. They're both great. So Angry Bull was released, and the best way I like to explain that, if you want to put them in buckets, because a lot of people like to put things in buckets, but Play Bull has a little bit more going on than Angry Bull does. Angry Bull's a little bit more smooth on the corner. So, man, when I make recommendations of people, Play Bull, I say it's great if you cooking a select or a choice, you really want to amp it up and hit a little punch, and maybe Wagyus and primes. And Angry Bull's got smooth corners, so maybe that brisket doesn't need quite as much help. So that's the general breakdown of those 2. And man, kind of the same thing. A couple years later, I've got Boss Hog, and really I ended up developing Butt Hurt, honestly, to compete with Boss Hog, because I think at some point, especially in Texas, the comp scene gets pretty saturated with the similar profiles. So I wanted to pull my pork in a different direction. To give something to compete against Boss Hog is why that was created. And then on the chicken products, Hinge Wrench is our brine. So we have a chicken injection, we have a chicken brine. People do inject with Hinge Wrench and do really well. Man, it's really great as a beer salt. And the past couple of months, I've been using it on my beer, and I'm like, I need to really put this in a shaker and like have beer salt, because I can't find a better beer salt than this. Hinge Wrench is I probably use more of that product than any of my others. And if I could only use one of mine at a comp, I'd probably pick Hinge Wrench.
So I gotta say, Phil, I had one of those skirt moments when you were talking about brisket. So are you trying to tell me you can get away with cooking a choice brisket down in Texas in a competition?
Oh yeah.
Let's hear
Man,
a
I would
little bit about that, because I guarantee nobody up here has heard about that. We're all sending money to Australia and getting briskets from over there for some damn reason.
Man, Kit Polk does it every weekend. I don't know if y'all know the legend Kit Polk, Texas cook, good friend of mine, but man, he squeaks when he walks. He's tight, man. He's not going to spend over $45 for a brisket. So, he'll go to San Antonio and he's at the HEB. I'm like, man, they got any brisket? Oh, they got some snakes. Well, do they? Yeah, there's three up. Man, will you buy them all? Pay you back? Oh man, that's a lot of money. I'm like, man, I don't care, buy them for me. And he's like, I found me a nice choice, 42 bucker, and he cooks with them every weekend and does really well.
All right, I just had another skirt moment. So y'all, you can walk into the grocery store and buy a Snake River Farms brisket. We don't have that up here either.
Wow.
That's pretty awesome. But so you ever cook any choice briskets or some of those lower end grades?
Yeah, in comps, man, not
just
many.
in general, because I'm wondering, how do you approach it different if you got a really nice prime or better versus, a not so nice? What do you do different to get a killer result? Because I know not everybody in Texas got a Wagyu every time.
Yeah, I mean, we can just kind of tackle that question as if we're cooking at home. Like not every weekend do you want to, or if you're cooking at home, maybe you don't want to cook $150, $200 brisket, and you do want to cook a $50 brisket, right? A choice, and to make that a quality product. So, man, I'll just pull back on it. Like, I'm not going to punch it as much as I would at a comp, because we all know we're going for that one bite at a comp. And even my comp brisket, I try to be more on the end. I try to push the limits to as much flavor as I can to make that person still want to keep eating pieces. I don't want them to go and think, whoa, but I don't really want another bite. I think that's when you've gone too far. So I try to keep all my food pushed to the limits of, man, I still want to go back and eat that. It's not over the top to where I could only take one bite and I really don't want to take more. And the same approach with, if it's that choice brisket, man, I'm going to pull back just a little bit. I'm going to treat it a little bit more tender. I mean, when you've got all that marbling in either a well marbled prime or Wagyu brisket, man, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You're not going to dry that thing out, and you just got a pretty big window with that stuff as far as eating wise. But yeah, on the choice, you don't have near as much marbling or fat content to work with.
Let's talk about one more product. Dan Dickey from 922 Barbecue, our OG17 friend out in Wisconsin. Don't sleep on the Rainmaker. So yeah, speaking of Rainmaker, your white phosphate product, I gotta say, even when Mr. Freak and I were hitting it hard in KCBS, we barely could use a whole bag of white phosphates in our comps. So, tell us about how you're using that in a whole season of our 25 or whatever comp. So tell us about that.
What is it for? How do you use it?
Yeah, so we've got phosphates in our injections, and all Rainmaker is that poly blend that we've used in there, specifically designed for big proteins. Your chicken, your pork butts, your briskets. Man, phosphates. We could spend hours and hours going over phosphates in a scientific term, but to simplify it to where we understand it, tons of different uses for phosphates. Typically used in food preservation or in seafood. They do it in vegetables, and these are designed for big proteins and to attach to those meat molecules and retain that moisture. Man, I don't know. In the comp world, man, most folks I know are pouring the phosphates to them. So, and there was in my mind, it kind of late to the party on that, but man, why not have those phosphates I've got in those injections and have them available to comp guys that want to add more phosphates to it. And man, I do believe is a tenderization process that goes through to achieve a better tenderness as well as a super moisture retention.
Well, Phil, I really appreciate the rundown. Phosphates is something we didn't really know we were using when we first got started, because they were just in the injections we were using. Back then, when we first got started, there wasn't as many as there were now, but there was this thing called Fab. You remember Fab? Did you ever hear of that one?
Man, I remember Tab. I think that's a soft drink. The Fab.
Yeah. Fab was different, but yeah, people. Then all of a sudden they were just blowing up everywhere. Butcher's had his stuff out, and then Cosmos, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, I guess you got to inject stuff if you want to try and win in this game. So yeah, we got into it too. I don't really do a lot of that at home cooking, but I don't know. What do you think? You got one of those $40 briskets. Is that worth pumping it up with something?
Oh, 100%. So when I'm adding extra phosphates to either my injections or using them alone, a tablespoon to about 20 to 24 ounces of liquid is that ratio that I find is optimal. And that's a guide to what I recommend as far as using it. And that they go into our Thanksgiving turkey every year. I just think it just does something special to that with the moisture level. We're going to go foul play and we're going to pump it up with some Rainmaker.
Yeah, y'all
Nobody
shakers
wants it.
hear
Nobody
that?
wants a dry
It's
bird.
made in Turkey. I heard that. Bird. That's awesome. Well, what's next for LC Barbecue? When you're looking out over the next quarter or half year, what's on your plate?
Yeah, I try not to put deadlines on my stuff. Last year it was a goal of mine to work on sauces and glazes and get something to market by year's end, which didn't happen, and much slower pace than I had liked. But we made some improvements on that. We're getting somewhere. So I would see, without deadlines, depending on how the products respond in comps or whatever, maybe late this year, we might have some sauces and glazes out there. That's a natural progression. I'm working on a couple different rubs on the side. I wouldn't expect those one of them could be ready in the next 3 or 4 months or whatever. And then I do have another chicken injection brainchild working in there. So a lot of busy stuff going on, and depending on when they come together, when they might hit the market. So definitely don't try to put deadlines on there because I fail on those every time.
All right, no deadlines here. How about some of the big competitions? You got plans for any of those where folks listening can come out and say hi, get to know you?
Yeah, for sure. I think I can go over the rundown pretty quick in my head over the next couple months, but we'll head this weekend over to Tomball and do Hold'em and Hit'em, a CBA event over there. It's normally around 100 teams, super event. We got
100 teams, y'all. That's just an everyday weekend in Texas.
Yeah, it's not one of the bigger ones, but it's a nice one. I mean, there's I don't know how many are over 100 teams in Texas a year, but quite a few. But then we'll head over the next weekend to San Antonio Rodeo. I think it's around 300 teams. I've got my class. I do comp classes, and this year it's scheduled for February 3rd and 4th, and that class is full. So we'll have our comp class. We'll go to Smoking on the Rio in Mercedes the next weekend. That's a couple hundred to 250 team comp. The weekend after that is CBA World Championship, their banquet awards and once a year cook-off World Championship. I think they had 140 teams last year. And I think the next weekend is Houston Rodeo, Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo.
Well, everybody up here in the north, we always complain that there aren't all that many events. Y'all can move down to Texas and do all the events you want, but you still got to drive just as far. That's the moral of that story. So on our end, Ms. Freak and I, we're putting the finishing touches on our competition steak and ribs class coming up this Saturday, the 20th. We sold that out last week, so thanks to everyone coming to that. And then we are heading up to fabulous Green Bay area in Wisconsin for one of our favorite and coldest events of the year. That's Frozen Bones Steak and Rib Championship up in Van Dyne. That's hosted by Tim's Full Belly Deli. Tim's an awesome dude. Anyone who's within striking distance of that event, I highly recommend it, especially SCA cooks who are going to do ribs down at Worlds. We don't get to do a lot of ribs in SCA, but this will be a great tune-up. If you can make those Wisconsin judges happy, you got a great shot rolling into Worlds. And my advice is get you some of that last call and try that as you're working out your recipe. So one other thing I think we got to talk about, Ann. What's that?
I love it. One other thing. We have just placed our order for our Lucky Lighter 8.0, our 8th annual edition. The invoice was paid today. They will be there in time for SCA Worlds in Fort Worth in March. And we can't wait to see our barbecue family and SCA family on the trail soon.
Thank you,
That's
everybody,
awesome.
for tuning in to Flavor Talk with the Freaks with Mr. Phillip Breeden from LC BBQ. And I really sincerely mean it. These are some awesome products, and you owe them to yourself to give them a try. We hope to see everyone back next month for Flavor Talk with the Freaks. Have a great night, everybody, and stay warm.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.